Hi everyone, this is Jen and you're watching BPD Woman. Welcome to the channel. If you are tuning in for the first time, welcome. If you are coming back to the channel, thank you. It's great to have you. On this channel, you will learn what it's like to live with borderline personality disorder. You will also learn how to better understand your disorder, your emotions, how to live more effectively with your BPD, how to overcome certain behaviors that have become problematic using skills like DBT, reflection, and sharing my own personal experience of how I have managed my borderline personality. My main goal is to help you achieve your goals in life and relationships. Now, I am not a therapist, a life coach, a PhD, although there are many of those channels out there, and I recommend some of them, especially Dr. Daniel Fox. Check him out. However, I can answer one very important question that most of those folks cannot, which is, what is it like to live with borderline personality disorder? I was diagnosed 20 years ago with the disorder, and since then I have gone through several, actually probably half a dozen, multiple rounds of dialectical behavior therapy. I have reread, I own every major text on the disorder. I have committed myself to workbooks, recovery, therapy sessions. I'm sure at this point I've spent in the five-figure amount to better combat my behaviors and live more effectively so that I can achieve my goals in life. If this all sounds good to you, please hit subscribe and that bell below. I produce several videos a week, usually about 3 to 5, and I would like you to catch each one. So, introductions have gone. Now, let's get into today's topic, which is, am I allowed? Asserting yourself when you have borderline personality disorder. I'll be looking at some notes here, so if I have my eyes off of you momentarily, that is why. You know, in this video today, I want to talk about two things, primarily, that will help give you mastery and make you feel more confident and help to reduce your emotional reactivity and instill you with some more effective behaviors, replacing some of the ineffective borderline behaviors that we have all come to know and grow up with. Recovery takes a very, very, very long time. The good news is, if you have borderline personality disorder, congratulations, you have one of the most treatable, well-researched, well-documented personality disorders out there. There are so many wonderful treatments, doctors, books. You can recover from these behaviors, and that's all that borderline personality disorder, and really any personality disorder, is. It is an adopted set and pattern of maladaptive behaviors. And so today I want to talk to you about changing one of those behaviors that can, again, instill confidence, make you feel good about yourself, increase your self-worth, and rely a little bit less on other people's version of what your worth is. So, when you have BPD, you usually have the following: a low self-worth or low self-esteem. You probably have quite a deal of anxiety, especially when you are around other people, and especially sometimes when it's a larger group, such as a party or a family gathering or a workplace. And you have trouble asking for what you want. You rely a lot of the time on other people's validation, which we often look to in relationships. For me, and even still, I have to remind myself that relationships do not equal my self-worth. The question I want to always ask myself, or try to always ask myself, is, do I like me? Instead of asking the question, do they like me? So, and if you do like you, I almost guarantee you they will like you will generally almost always follow. Therefore, you have not usually adapted a sustained pattern of being able to ask for things that you need. And oftentimes there are things that you need that are legitimate. Sometimes they are critical. Sometimes they are rightfully owed to you. And you have a right to ask for them. That's another note I need to make. Right. Do I have a right to this? Sorry, that's just something, one other note. I get really fastidious about all the notes. I want to make sure I cover everything for all of us in these videos. So, due to the environment that you grew up in, which was problematic, traumatic, invalidating, you have been gaslighted. You have been told things, like in my instance, I grew up with two parents who were incredibly abusive to each other, to themselves, and a father who gaslighted me for about 20 years that said, well, I'm sorry that you think like that. That never happened. So if you grow up in that for 20 years, it's no wonder that you have a hard time trusting your own perceptions and asking for things that are rightfully yours to ask. We're all people. We all have a right to assert ourselves. Knowing what you want, how to ask for it, knowing when the right time to ask for it is troublesome sometimes. And so let's talk about how to make it so that asking for what you need, knowing the right time to ask for what you need, how to go about asking for it, and how to throw in some tips so that you appear more confident and feel better about yourself, work alongside your goals. So why do we want to do this? Why do we want to ask for things? Why do we want to assert ourselves? Well, you want to try and reverse your low self-esteem. You want to try to feel better about yourself from the inside. You know, when we give out our worth to others, it often feels anxious to us. Like, you know, what do you think of this situation? You know, if you had a problem and then you ask 5 other people what their thoughts may be on your problem, let's say you're having difficulties at work, or you know, maybe your mechanic is doing repairs on your car that aren't really what you think they should be. So, you know, you may ask 3, 4, 5 other people, what do you think of this situation? You know, and you'll get 3, 4, 5 different interpretations of what you should do, what their opinions are, when honestly, if you turned inward, took a moment, reflected, and just really settled into your own body. And I know that sounds new agey, and I'm not new agey, but I know that I'm feeling anxious and turning over my power to other people generally when I feel a tightness or a butterfly feeling in my stomach. So in trying to reduce that anxiety will help you overcome some of these patterns of behavior that you have learned over the years that have fed into your low self-worth, your tendency to seek validation from others, and equating other people's approval with your value that incorporates your self-esteem. Also, asking for what you want helps reverse the ineffective patterns of borderline, which namely, for me, instead of asking, I would tell. I would yell, tell and yell, right? Like, I want this, give it to me now. Okay, that generally, I mean, what if somebody did that to you? Are you more likely to give them something when they're yelling and telling, or when you're being asked in a calm manner? So that is the ultimate goal. So now, increase mastery, build confidence, decrease ineffective borderline behaviors. There are 2 types of ways to assert yourself, or 2 kinds of ways to assert yourself. There are questions, and then there are declarations, right? You have your interrogative statements in grammar, which is a question, and then you have your declarative statements in grammar. One of them ends with a question mark, one of them ends with a period. So types of questions would be, hey, would you like to go to the movies on Friday? Okay, it's a question mark. It allows for a continuance of the conversation. You are open, it's open-ended, you're opening it up. Then there is a declaration, an assertion, which is, I will not be going to the movies tonight. I don't feel well. Period. You're not opening up for discussion, although other people may try to keep the discussion going. Maybe they'll try to change your mind, but it ends with a period. And so you're just telling them how it is for you. So there will be things that you ask. There'll be things that I've asked of you. You will make declarations to others, and others will make declarations to you. Again, the questions lead to open discussion, where the declarations are a full stop. This is just how it is. So let me try and look at some of my notes here. Right. When you are asking for something, there are things that you need to, or that I recommend considering when asking for something. So a couple of things that you might want to consider are you in a good emotional state, right? I don't know if you've heard the HALT acronym, HALT. It stands for hungry, angry, lonely, tired. I like to add an S to it, which is sickness or stress. So hungry, angry, lonely, tired, sick, stressed. Are you hangry? Do you have PMS? Are you recuperating from an injury? Have you been well rested, or are you dealing with insomnia? Are you in wise mind and very regulated and ready to ask for what you want? Or are you very dysregulated and more in emotion mind? These are all things to consider and ask of yourself before you ask for something that you need. You want to put yourself in the best possible position to be successful and confident. Another thing to consider is it a good time for the other person to ask? Are they in a rush? Are they sick? Are they looking tired? Do they have a bunch of things going on? Are they in the middle of a move? Are they in the middle of becoming unemployed and like super stressed out? The other thing to consider when asking for something is, do I have a right to ask? Is it mine to ask? You consider what your relationship is with the other person. Are you in a situation where that person is your boss, or it's your parent, or it's your friend, or your spouse? Perhaps it's a subordinate, perhaps it's an employee of yours or a client. Perhaps it's the government, the police, right? Thinking about where you fit into that chain of what you're about to ask. So we've talked about assertions and we've talked about questions. And we've talked about what to consider when you're about to ask for something. For me, I know that if I haven't eaten much, in fact, I need a drink of water right now. If I haven't eaten much, then I feel low energy. I kind of have a brain fog. I know that in that moment, it's not the best time for me to ask for something. I know that if I ask in that moment, I might be letting myself down. I like to gather my thoughts. Sometimes I will make a little pros cons list, right? Or I'll put my thoughts out on paper so I know what I want to ask. When I prepare for these videos, I write out bullet points and things that I want to cover, and I look to them. That's fine. You're allowed to do that. Don't let it, you don't have to be rushed in asking for what you want. And we're going to talk about what happens if you ask for something and someone tramples over that. So we'll talk about how to deal with that. So let's talk about some examples of how it's paid off for me to ask for something. And I'll be looking at some notes here. Okay. Let's talk about a time that I have asked for something and it's made me feel good. Now, in all of these next few examples I'm going to give you, I want you to remember, and I want you to know a few things. Even though I have had 21 years of knowledge and recovery, as it were, from some of these behaviors, there are still some things that can be very difficult for me to overcome. And I generally feel a good deal of anxiety sometimes, or worry, or that I need to over-explain myself when I'm asking for something. And you shouldn't not, I don't like to use the word should, but you shouldn't have to feel that way. But it happens, right? And so when you are dealing with that anxiety or that feeling of, I don't really have a right to ask for this, or I'm not good enough to ask for this, or this is stupid, like all of that, all of those tapes or that core content that talks to you, you will have to set the tone for the other person. And there are things that you can do to raise your confidence and your presence to the other person. And then there are things that you can do to discredit yourself. And depending on which one of those you tend towards, that could have a more likely outcome of your goal. You know, you're more confident, you may get what you want more and more of the time. If you kind of waver or show that you really don't deserve something, then maybe somebody won't give it to you. Have you ever been sold something, or had a sales pitch? Think about, it could be, just shopping at a store, right? You ever have a really good salesperson that like looks at you in the eye, tells you exactly why this certain bag, tool, whatever it may be, why it's the best amount of money? Do they tell you like what all of the different attributes or good things are about buying this? They look you in the eye and they say, this is why this is so good and why I think you would like it. You may probably buy from a confident person, but if you went to the same store and they kind of fumbled with the display and the salesperson like didn't make a lot of eye contact and they were really unsure, would you feel as confident to buy from that person? Most likely you would not. So this is the analogy I want you to keep in mind, that having a good confidence level for yourself does read out to other people, and it can help you in asking for what you want. I would like to tell you about a time that I asked for something, even though I was feeling a little bit nervous, and it paid off for me. And when I mean pay off for me, I mean two things. Sometimes it pays off because it gets me the desired action or outcome that I want from the other person. But primarily the way that it makes me feel, or that it pays off, is how it makes me feel. It leaves me feeling like, okay, that was really hard to ask for, but I'm glad I did it. I have a right to ask for it. It was a good time for me. I think it was a good time for them. I'm done. Okay. A couple of instances that it's been difficult for me, but it's paid off. I own my own business. I have a very detailed payment and cancellation policy for my clients. I'm a pet sitter, and there's even a little bit more specific rules for those of my clients who are reoccurring and they buy services consistently every day of the week. I call those my reoccurring clients. And one of those policies is that you need to pay by 5 p.m. every week, every Sunday. And if you don't, then I don't guarantee your time. I might give away your slot. If I don't have money, you haven't booked, we're not confirmed, I won't hold up my calendar. So that's my policy. If there are several late payments, or if there are several cancellations and it starts to become irregular, then I say, listen, this isn't really regular for you anymore. You've also not been paying me on time. We need to talk about that. So sometimes that's difficult for me to enforce and ask for, to say, hey, Sylvia, or whatever the name may be, Sylvia, I've looked now and you've paid me late 3 consecutive weeks in a row. Or, hey, Sylvia, you have booked me usually Monday through Thursday, but the last month you've canceled 2 days a week. We need to talk about that, right? A respectful person will engage with you respectfully. They will say, you know what, you're absolutely right. I'm really sorry. And this is, I'll get this. People say, I'm sorry, it won't happen again. I apologize. Those are people that are respectful of my boundaries, my policies. And man, that's my ideal client, man. Somebody who respects me. I didn't become my own boss and open my own business to continue being disrespected. We all know how that works in the corporate world, right? I would say, 4 out of 5 times that I have to ask that or reinforce that, they're very responsive. Now, I've had a couple of boundary pushers, and we'll talk about that after. Another time that it's paid off for me that I've asked for something is when I ask for people to leave me a review on Google. They'll go to my business page. I'll say, hey, could you please leave me a review? If you don't ask, someone can't give you the answer, right? And so if I don't ask, then I won't get the result. And the result that I'm looking for is to have more Google reviews so that I increase my web presence and I garner more business. Another time that I've told somebody something that I wanted, or an example would be perhaps they say an insensitive joke or they think it's funny, and I'll say, I don't appreciate that. Or you might say, that's not funny to me. Period. That's it. Notice I didn't over-explain myself. I just told them that I didn't appreciate that. All you need to tell people is what your boundary is. That's all. Considering when it's a good time to ask for something is one of the 3 points that we talked about a few minutes ago. To consider, are you in a good emotional, physical state to ask? Is it a good time for the other person to ask? And the third being, do I have a right to ask? I remember there was a time when I was still working in the corporate world, and I had 2 bosses, and we'll call them A and B, okay? And I had some vacation time that I knew that I would like to take, and it was coming up. And my boss was a very busy guy. He traveled a lot. So sometimes he was in the office, sometimes he wasn't in the office. Sometimes I'd have to ask him things in person. Sometimes I'd have to ask him things over email. So I wanted to ask him for some vacation days, and the particular day he was in the office, he was kind of rushing and gathering things for a business trip. And, he looked a little bit flustered, and I knew that this might be the only time that I might see him in person for a week or so, but I was like, no, he's in a rush. This isn't the right time to ask. Okay, so I didn't ask him for the vacation. A couple days later, I secured something for him, or I had made a reservation, something of that nature, and he was really happy with my work, and he was like, oh, thanks. He replied over email, thanks, I really appreciate this, great work, great job, thanks, great. And I was like, this is a really good time for me to now ask for some time off, right? He's happy with my work. He's responding over email right now. He's available. So I wrote, hey, great, you're so welcome. By the way, I have some vacation time coming up. I was wondering if I could take off September 1 through the 5th. Is that good? And he wrote back, he's like, yeah, that's great. No problem. Now, what if I had asked him while he was in a rush that day and overwhelmed and running out the door, and I had grabbed him, blocking his way as he's trying to catch a train or a flight, like, hey, can I take this time off? He would, A, he'd be annoyed because he was late. B, he would probably be annoyed because I was delaying him. And he would probably say no, right? So that's a good time to consider, is this the right time to ask to get what I want? The whole goal here is to get the outcome that you want, whether that's a physical outcome, you would like to borrow the car, or a emotional outcome, you would like more respect, or, another kind of outcome, you want vacation time, something tangible like that. Now, those are all questions. Now, there are assertions that you also make, and we've touched on a few. So sometimes you will ask for things that you want. Other times you are going to tell people just how it is. So for instance, types of assertions could be, I'm breaking up with you. That's it. A type of assertion would be, I'm sick, I won't be coming into work today. Period, right? Type of assertion would be like, I'd like a large decaf coffee. Thank you. Those 3 statements are periods, no room for discussion. They are declarative statements, where all of the other examples that we've been talking about are interrogative. They're question-based. Can I have time off? Can I borrow the car? Could you not use that type of language? Do not tell that joke, please. Those are questions. These are assertions. it's difficult to make assertions. I would argue, for me, sometimes it's been more difficult to make an assertion. You will deal with people who will trample on your boundaries. You'll get boundary pushers all the time. People will, it's like kids, like, mommy, can I have this? No. Mommy, can I have this? Mommy, what if I ask this way? Mommy, mommy, mommy. That's a child who hasn't learned certain skills, but the analogy remains the same. They're pushing boundaries. They're trying to get something by repeatedly saying yes or no. And that will make it harder for you if you already have a hard time asserting yourself. That'll make it harder for you to say yes or no. You might feel guilty and recant what you've asked for. So some things to try to avoid when you're making a request or when you are making an assertion are, don't apologize for what you want, right? There's a difference between saying, could you please not make that joke? I don't really appreciate that. That's one way. And then another way would be, could you please not make that joke? I'm sorry to ask. It's just that, like, I have a really long traumatic history and, I would really, I know it's your house. I'm sorry to ask. Okay. That is apologizing for a request. You don't want to do that because that minimizes your request, right? So try not to apologize for your requests, as difficult as it may be, as difficult as you may want to keep talking after that period. Make your request. Could you please not make that joke? And that's it. But it can be hard. It can be hard. I like to overtalk, if there's like white space and nobody's saying anything, I'm like, oh, I should say something. Don't minimize your request. Don't say things like, I know this is really silly of me to say, but, or I'm really sorry to ask this, but I'm probably just making something out of nothing, but could you please not? Those are all ways that you're minimizing your request. Again, think about that analogy of the super confident salesperson and the not so confident salesperson. The not so confident salesperson would likely be a person who minimizes their request. You also want to things to avoid is not appearing confident. You want to appear confident when you're speaking to someone. That means looking them in the eye, having a strong body language, right? Being tall, head up, good posture, not avoiding your eyes, not fidgeting, not twirling the hair, not biting on the glasses. All of those social cues essentially say, I'm not feeling confident. Feel free to maybe trample on what I'm about to say. Something else to try to avoid is being sarcastic or minimizing the other person. You don't want them to feel bad, right? The whole goal here is to have an open discussion and to both get what you want. In the example where I said, could you please not use that language, or could you please refrain from joking about that? I don't like that. You are respecting them, right? You're not passing a judgment on anything that they're saying, but you're also not minimizing them. There's a difference between saying, could you please not, there's a difference between saying, could you please not make that joke? And then there's a difference in this statement. Could you please not make that joke? It really shows how fucking stupid you are. Okay. Nobody's going to listen to you after that, right? Now, there are times when you can demand, right? Like, there will be demands like, stop, I don't want you coming physically any closer to me, right? You don't have to explain anything. But you also don't want to make someone else feel bad. Why? Sure, it's going to hurt their feelings, but it's also going to hurt your feelings. Think about how that makes you feel. When you've come down from that emotional roller coaster of anger, I know I have. I'm like, oh my God, I feel so much shame. Why did I say this? Why did I do that? Okay, so we've talked about what's a question, what's an assertion. We've talked about things to consider when you're asking for something. We've talked about some examples of how it pays off. We've talked about things to avoid when you're asking for something or asserting something. Now we're going to talk about when people try to push those boundaries, and we're going to talk about how to turn the tables back on them. Sometimes you're going to just have to let something go, whether that means you end a friendship, a relationship, a business partnership, whether you just kind of wash your hands of it and say, it's a lost cause, this isn't worth it to me. Remember that question, where do I want my energy to go for the day? What is my ultimate goal? I had a client who I asserted to her. I had noticed she paid me multiple late times. Probably it went like 3 out of 5 weeks she paid me late or not on time. And she'd also last minute changed the schedule. Because I have my policies, and I have my policies for a reason, she reached out and she's like, this was like 8 o'clock now when the payment was due at 5. Sorry, I am not, I didn't get back to you earlier. I only need 2 walks this week instead of 5. And so hope that's not a problem. And I wrote back, I'm like, no, that's not a problem. We can do that. However, I do need to remind you of the payment policy. You have been late several times. Payment is due at 5 p.m. And if there will be more reoccurring cancellations on your end, we should look to switching to an ad hoc booking service. She wrote back, you know what? Forget it. Never mind. Or she said something to the effect of like, we will not be needing walks from you anymore. If I go back to work, I'll let you know then. So I replied, okay. Period. She was trying to trample on my boundaries. She didn't acknowledge my request. She didn't show respect for my boundaries or my requests, even though I used nice language. I was assertive. I wasn't angry or sarcastic, right? I avoided all of the things. I didn't apologize for my request. She did not like that. She decided she would throw a tantrum and end our business relationship, even though I'd been walking her dog for about 1.5 years at that point, because she didn't like to be called out on her bullshit. Well, sorry. These are the policies. Respect them or don't. Like, that's fine. Whatever, I booked other clients. There's someone else in her time slot now. That's no skin off my teeth. I would rather have a client book once a week that was respectful rather than, somebody who books 5 times a week who doesn't respect me. You let her go. There was another client very similar who I had a very clear vacation cancellation policy, and basically it states after 7 days, you don't get a full refund. You may get, it's something like 5 to 6 days, you'll get 60% back, 2 to 3 days, 50% back. Anything under 2 days, you get 0, nothing. You don't get refunded. So I had a client who was very happy with me, who had done multiple visits and bookings with me, and had also let me in her home to do a couple of house sittings. So she had booked a house sitting, and it was going to be about a 4-day house sit. So we're talking maybe $400 or $500. It wasn't cheap for them, this married couple. And she texted me a night and a half before the booking was supposed to start and said, would you consider giving us we're really happy with you, but would you please consider giving us a credit? We're canceling our vacation. And again, this was a day and a half before the booking was supposed to commence. And I said, no, I'm sorry. My policy, actually, I don't think I said I'm sorry. I said, no, I wouldn't be able to do that. I didn't apologize. I never apologized for enforcing my policy. I'll find the screenshot of the text, but I'm pretty sure I never apologized to her. I said, no, my policy is X amount of refund on this day, X amount of refund this day. So she immediately texted back and said, I will never be using your services ever again. And so I have an iPhone, so I just liked her comment. Okay, I was being a little bit snarky, it's true. But I was like, okay, I wasn't about to engage with her on her tantrum. She didn't like a boundary. I asserted myself. She said, no, I don't like that. So I'm going to take my toys and go home. And I said, okay, take your toys and go home. That's absolutely fine. And then she went on, she got a little paranoid. She's like, did you make extra keys to my house? And I'm like, why would I do that? First of all, I never make keys to anybody's house. I barely carry their keys. Again, it did pay off, because not only did I feel good about me, in both of these situations, I felt good about me, I asserted myself. I stuck to it. It was difficult. I didn't like the way they responded. It made me feel uncomfortable. But in the end, I felt good about myself and what I did. And I kind of cleared that space for more ideal clients to come into my life, which they have since then. Not everyone is going to respond to you, no matter whether you're using a DBT skill or you're making an assertion or you're making a request. Not everyone is going to be an adult about it. They're not going to always be respectful. You will have to look out for people that trample on your boundaries. And again, that can be hard, especially if you are still more likely to put your value and worth and sense of validation into that other person. So if they start to, act tantrum-like, you might take that as a personal reflection of you. Hold steadfast. It's not you. Stick to asking for what you want. It's your right. Another way to deal with someone who is trampling on your requests or boundaries is to use clarifying questions. Give them back the facts and then ask them a question instead. For instance, let's go back to my old corporate world analogy or story. I had two bosses, A and B. Okay, I worked for both of them. They were always both vying for my time. So one would try to pull me in this direction. The other one never really tried to bother with my boundaries. He was pretty respectful of what I needed to do and checked in that I had what I needed to do my job. The other one, he just acted like he was top banana, only guy. That was it. So he would constantly try to be like, oh, you're working on that for B? Geez, well, I really need this. I need you to get this done for me right now. I know how to prioritize my tasks, and a lot of the time his tasks were A, not that important, or B, I could do them later. They didn't require my attention right then. But again, he was a boundary pusher and he didn't see it that way. So he'd ask. So I went to boss B and I told him about this. And this is kind of where I learned how to ask clarifying questions. And he said, this is what I want you to tell boss A. Say the following. Okay, boss A, you are asking me to make a plane reservation for an event that will take place in 4 months, and you'd like me to do that instead of finishing the work with the deadline for next week for boss B. Would you like me to tell boss B that I should stop doing his work to make your plane reservation for 4 months from now? And when I would do that, boss A would be like, oh, no. Okay, right. Do boss's B thing first. So give them the option. Let them know what's at stake, right? That way, I'm not pinned if I choose to do boss A's work instead of boss B's, right? Had I not asked a clarifying question, then the fallout may come back to me like, A would be like, well, why didn't you do this? I told you to do this. And B would be like, why didn't you get this done? You knew this was due last week. Clarifying questions. Now, it wasn't sarcastic. Notice that my question wasn't sarcastic. It was factual. It gave the facts, and it was a legitimate, non-rhetorical question. Do you want me to do this and let this person down, etc.? Okay, so again, there are assertions and there are questions. We do them to increase our mastery. We do them to reduce our low self-worth of ourselves, increase our capacity to ask for things, which in turn help make us more effective, show that we're confident to others, attract others to us that are respectful, and also, and more importantly, it changes that pattern of ineffective borderline behaviors. It takes a lot of practice. It takes a long time to make it a routine, but it does give confidence. It does work. So I hope this has been helpful. Please leave your comments, suggestions, thoughts, replies below. And also, if you have an idea or a suggestion for a video, I'd love to hear it. Thanks so much again. This has been BPD Woman. I'm Jen. Until next time, be effective. Bye.